"Get him out of here," Victor Hale sneered, his silk tie glinting beneath the boardroom lights. Melissa Trent smirked as two guards moved toward Ethan Clark, the quiet programmer whose worn sneakers squeaked on the polished marble floor. Laughter echoed from the executives as Ethan clutched the cardboard box filled with his belongings. To them, he was nothing but a replaceable cog, a nobody in faded jeans. But what they didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't just another programmer. He was the mind who had quietly built the very digital skeleton that kept Skyline Innovations alive. Every password, every security layer, every operational heartbeat of the corporation was woven together by his hands. So when the door slammed behind him, Skyline's leaders thought they had erased him. They thought wrong. 30 minutes later, their entire system would freeze. Phones would ring with panic, screens would black out, and every executive who had mocked him would stare at one another in horror. And in that moment, the same man they had humiliated would become their only hope. They would have no choice but to beg the janitor-shoed programmer back inside, on his terms. Ethan's humiliation began long before the guards touched his arm. It started with Victor Hale's smirk, the kind that dripped arrogance. The boardroom smelled of polished oak and expensive cologne, every detail designed to remind people like Ethan that they didn't belong. Melissa Trent leaned back in her leather chair, crossing her legs deliberately as she delivered the final words, "Your services are no longer required." Frankly, Ethan, you don't fit the image of Skyline Innovations. The words landed like knives, though the board chuckled lightly, as if cruelty were sport. Ethan stood frozen, his plain shirt wrinkled from too many hours hunched over code. His cardboard box sat at his feet, stuffed hastily with a tangle of headphones, a cracked coffee mug, and a few scattered papers that represented years of devotion. His sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as he shifted uncomfortably. "Don't take it personally," one of the executives said with mock sympathy. "We just need fresh faces. People who can represent our brand." The others laughed again, their voices bouncing across the glass walls. Ethan's cheeks burned. He opened his mouth once, twice, as if words might come, but humility silenced him. He wasn't the type to argue or make a scene. He simply lowered his head and reached for the box. Melissa's eyes glinted. "Security, show him out. We can't have this disruption lingering." Two men in tailored suits stepped forward. They weren't violent, but their grip on Ethan's arms was firm, final. As they escorted him through the long, gleaming hallway, employees stopped to watch. Whispers followed him like shadows. "Isn't that Ethan?" someone muttered. "The guy who worked all night fixing the last system crash?" Another voice snickered, "Guess even genius doesn't save you when you dress like that." The humiliation was complete. By the time the elevator doors closed, Ethan felt smaller than ever. The building that had devoured years of his life spat him out without a shred of gratitude. His reflection in the steel doors showed a man who looked ordinary, maybe even invisible. No one seeing him now would believe he was the architect of the entire Skyline system. When he reached the lobby, the humiliation deepened. Melissa herself had followed to ensure his exit was a spectacle. She addressed the receptionist loudly enough for the crowd to hear, "Cancel his access card. We can't risk a nobody wandering back in." The receptionist nodded obediently, but her eyes flicked with discomfort. Even she knew Ethan had saved the company countless times. Yet the pressure of hierarchy silenced her compassion. As Ethan walked across the gleaming marble of the lobby, whispers grew louder. Some employees pitied him, others laughed. "That's what happens when you don't fit in," one whispered. "Skyline's about image." He never had it. A junior developer, clutching a tablet, muttered under her breath, "But he's the one who made this place work." Her voice, however, was drowned by the chorus of gossip. Outside, the cold air stung his face. Ethan hugged the box against his chest. He felt stripped bare, reduced to nothing more than the cracked mug in his possession. People rushed past, dressed in suits, heels clicking against the pavement, none sparing a glance at the man whose work had touched every part of the company they idolized. He was invisible now. Yet in his invisibility lay his strength. Because what Skyline had forgotten, blinded by arrogance and vanity, was that Ethan wasn't just another programmer. He was the architect of their digital empire. He had built the system from its foundation, weaving in protections, codes, and fail-safes that no one else could understand. While executives flaunted success on stage, Ethan spent sleepless nights ensuring their data remained untouchable, their operations seamless. He knew the heartbeats of their servers, the rhythm of their transactions, the skeleton beneath their skin of luxury. Upstairs, the laughter continued. Victor Hale leaned back in his chair, savoring the victory of power displayed. "That's what I call pruning the tree," he said smugly to the board. "We don't need weeds like him making us look bad. Skyline is about vision, image, leadership. Not about nobodies hiding in server rooms." Melissa smirked. "Don't worry, Victor. We'll hire someone flashy, someone who looks the part. The media will love it." The board nodded, their arrogance blinding them further. They toasted glasses of sparkling water, congratulating themselves on what they called a bold decision. But in the server rooms, deep below their tower of glass and pride, something stirred. A silent process initiated itself, invisible to the flashy dashboards executives relied on. Ethan's code, meticulous, layered, alive, was waking. One by one, subsystems whispered to one another, recognizing the absence of their creator. Without his oversight, they shifted into protective mode. Password gates reconfigured, encryption protocols began looping endlessly, and a digital lock began to tighten. Still in the street, Ethan walked slowly, absorbing each cruel word that had been thrown his way. He replayed the sneers, the mocking tones. It hurt, yes, but beneath the pain was clarity. They had dismissed him as nothing. They had forgotten who had built their empire. And soon, they would remember. As he turned a corner, the glass tower of Skyline Innovations gleamed behind him. Its lights shone arrogantly against the sky. Inside, the people who had laughed at him remained oblivious. But in less than 30 minutes, their laughter would turn into panic. And the same man they had humiliated would become the only one who could save them. Before the story turns toward its storm, let's pause for a moment. What you've just seen is Ethan's humiliation, the kind of moment many of us know too well, being underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel invisible. But here's the truth, when people overlook you, they also overlook your strength. And that strength, sooner or later, always finds a way to rise. If you've ever been in Ethan's place, mocked, underestimated, pushed aside, I want you to know you're not alone. This channel is all about stories where the underestimated fight back, where the overlooked prove their worth. And if you're feeling this story resonate, now is the perfect time to subscribe. Because just like Ethan's about to turn his humiliation into victory, we'll keep sharing stories that remind you of your own hidden power. So hit that button, join the community, and let's see what happens when humility meets arrogance head-on. Skyline Innovations' tower pulsed with artificial calm, but beneath the surface, chaos was brewing. In the executive suite, Victor Hale paced the length of the boardroom, oblivious to the subtle changes flickering across his massive screen. Numbers froze mid-calculation, dashboards glitched, and alerts blinked red before vanishing. The system was no longer obeying. Why is the quarterly report not updating? Victor barked. Melissa clicked furiously on her tablet, her confident expression slipping into unease. I don't know. The servers aren't syncing. It's like something's blocking them. Another executive frowned. It's probably just a hiccup. IT will fix it. But when they called IT, only silence answered. The technicians stared blankly at their monitors, powerless as doors requiring digital keys refused to unlock, emails bounced back unreadable, and even payroll data vanished into encrypted fog. The heart of Skyline, its digital bloodstream, was shutting down. In the lobby, employees whispered nervously as their screens flickered black. Phones rang endlessly, clients demanding explanations. "We're losing millions by the minute," a project manager shouted, his face pale. Panic rippled outward, spreading like fire. Meanwhile, Ethan sat at a quiet cafe just blocks away, his cardboard box at his feet. He stirred a cup of coffee, calm despite the storm he knew was unfolding. His fingers rested on his phone, a single encrypted app glowing faintly. He didn't need to touch it, the scripts were already running. He had built the system with loyalty, never intending to use this backdoor. But after the humiliation, after being discarded like trash, he had decided they needed a lesson. A lesson in humility. Back in the tower, Victor's voice grew louder. "Give me someone who understands what's happening. Where are the logs? Why can't we access our own system?" His face turned crimson as Melissa whispered urgently, "Victor, this isn't a glitch. It's deliberate." The room fell silent. Executives exchanged looks. The idea hung in the air like poison. Someone had locked him out. And there was only one person who could. "Ethan," one board member muttered, his voice tight with dread. Victor slammed his fist on the table. Ridiculous. He was a nobody. But even as he spoke, realization gnawed at him. Ethan had written the system's core. No one else knew it like he did. No consultant, no flashy hire, no outside contractor could navigate the labyrinth Ethan had built. Minutes later, an emergency meeting gathered in the boardroom. Phones buzzed with furious clients. Investors threatened lawsuits. Employees huddled in corners, helpless. Skyline, the empire of glass and arrogance, was paralyzed. Melissa's mask of superiority cracked. "Victor, we have no choice. We need him." Victor's jaw clenched. "I will not beg that man." But desperation had no patience for pride. As the building descended into chaos, Melissa picked up her phone. Her fingers hesitated, hovering over Ethan's number. For the first time, she felt the sting of her own cruelty, the echo of her mocking words when she had thrown him out. Now, the balance of power had shifted, and it terrified her. She dialed. The call rang once, twice. Ethan looked at the screen, sipping his coffee. He let it ring out. He wasn't ready yet. Not until they understood the weight of what they had done. In the boardroom, the executives panicked further. If payroll isn't restored by tonight, employees will walk out. If our clients' systems stay frozen, lawsuits will bury us. Victor raged. "Get him back. I don't care how." But Ethan wasn't going to return as a discarded employee crawling for mercy. When he came back, it would be on his terms, with the entire company forced to see his worth. And as Skyline crumbled under its own arrogance, the first cracks of humility began to show in those who had mocked him most. The silence in the boardroom stretched until it felt unbearable. Every executive sat stiff in their chairs, trying to reconcile the image of Ethan, the man they had just escorted out in humiliation, with the reality of Ethan now, calm and commanding, holding the company's lifeblood at his fingertips. The glow of the monitors reflected in his glasses, making him look almost untouchable. Harold Vance, the CEO, cleared his throat. His arrogance had melted into something close to desperation. "Ethan, listen. Let's talk about this like civilized men. You've proven your point. Now let's come to an arrangement." Ethan leaned back in the chair, his eyes fixed on Harold. "An arrangement? You fired me in front of everyone, Harold. You made sure I left as a spectacle. And now you're asking for a deal?" His tone carried no anger, just a quiet weight that made his words sting harder than any outburst. Clarissa, the sharp-tongued board member, spoke up. "Look, we underestimated you. Clearly. But this is bigger than pride. We have investors, regulators, international clients. If they even smell instability, we'll collapse overnight. If you care about this company, about the people working here, don't push it further." A dry laugh escaped Ethan's lips. "Care about the people? The same people who watched as I was escorted out? Who whispered behind my back when I worked late nights fixing the code they couldn't understand? No, Clarissa. Don't twist this into me being responsible for your mess." His hands danced across the keyboard again. On the main screen, projections appeared, revenue streams, contracts, the balance sheets that painted the company as a titan. With a few more keystrokes, the numbers inverted, showing what would happen if the system stayed locked: missed deadlines, lawsuits, evaporating trust. The board members paled. One executive muttered, almost to himself, "We'd be done in days." Ethan let the projection run its course before freezing the screen on a single line: critical dependency, Ethan Cole. The words pulsed like a warning beacon. Gasps rippled through the room. The statement wasn't just true in this moment, it had always been true. Ethan had been the quiet architect, the one who patched the vulnerabilities, who kept the digital scaffolding upright while others took credit. They had never noticed until now. And now, it was undeniable. Harold finally stood, slamming his hands on the table. Enough. His face was red, his voice breaking between fury and fear. Name your price, Ethan. Whatever it is, you'll have it. Money, title, stock, you want back in? You've got it. Just end this circus before it destroys us all. The others nodded vigorously, some pleading with their eyes, others with whispered agreements. Their arrogance had crumbled. All that remained was panic and submission. Ethan let the silence linger, savoring the reversal. Then, he closed the laptop with a soft click, the sudden absence of glowing screens leaving the room darker, heavier. He stood, straightened his jacket, and spoke with quiet certainty. I don't want your money. I don't want your title. And I sure as hell don't want to be part of a company that only values people when they're forced to. Confusion rippled across the table. Harold's mouth opened, but no words came. Clarissa leaned forward, trying to mask her desperation with curiosity. Then, what do you want? Ethan's eyes hardened. I want you to remember this. I want you to know that the person you mocked, the one you thought disposable, held your empire in the palm of his hand. And I want you to live with the knowledge that your survival, your jobs, your reputations, wasn't saved by your brilliance, but by the man you thought beneath you. The weight of his words crushed the room into silence. No one dared to move, to breathe too loudly. And with that, Ethan walked to the door. The security guards who had once dragged him out stepped aside now, their eyes wide with awe and shame. He didn't look back. As the door closed behind him, the executives sat in stunned silence. Some clutched their heads, others stared at the blank monitors, and Harold collapsed into his chair, utterly defeated. The power dynamic had been rewritten in less than an hour, and there was no undoing it. The company might have survived that night, but everyone in that room knew the truth. It survived not because of the CEO's leadership or the board's strategy, but because of Ethan, the man they had fired, humiliated, and discarded. He had proven himself the architect, the guardian, the unshakable cornerstone of everything they'd built. And no one would ever forget it. Morning broke over the glass towers of the company headquarters, but instead of the usual hum of confidence, the building pulsed with unease. Overnight, whispers had grown into a storm. Every corner of the office buzzed with stories about Ethan Cole, the man they had seen humiliated and dismissed, only to return hours later and bring the company to its knees. What once had been laughter at his expense was now awe, mixed with guilt. Employees spoke of him in hushed tones in the cafeteria. Some described the glow of the screens in the boardroom, the way Ethan seemed to command the very heart of the system. Others marveled at how calm he had been, how unshakable while the board panicked like children caught in a storm. The myth of the fired programmer who held the empire hostage spread like wildfire, each retelling exaggerating but always circling back to the same truth: Ethan had proven indispensable. Inside the top floor, though, the atmosphere was darker. Harold Vance, once the picture of confidence and control, sat slumped at his desk. His tie was loosened, his eyes rimmed red from a sleepless night. He had built his reputation on control, but now, every headline, every rumor, reminded him that he had lost it to a man he'd mocked and discarded. Karma had turned its gaze on him, and it was merciless. The board was no kinder. At an emergency meeting, voices rose in anger. Some directors demanded Harold step down. Others threatened to pull investment if immediate changes weren't made. The humiliation he had engineered for Ethan had returned, magnified 100 times, and Harold was left defenseless. His allies shrank away, His authority crumbled. The empire he had ruled through arrogance was slipping from his grasp. Clarissa, the board member who had once dismissed Ethan so casually, found herself in the spotlight too. A journalist unearthed old recordings of her belittling employees, mocking low-level staffers as expendable. Paired with Ethan's story, her words spread like fire on social media. Investors began questioning her judgment. She who had sneered at Ethan was now forced to issue apologies that rang hollow. Her reputation, carefully crafted over years, fractured almost overnight. Meanwhile, Ethan did not bask in victory. He didn't seek interviews or accept the lucrative offers that began arriving in his inbox. Instead, he returned to his modest apartment, sat at his battered desk, and opened a laptop that was entirely his own. For the first time in months, he coded freely, not for profit, not for corporate masters, but for the joy of creation. The silence of his small room felt richer than the chaos of boardrooms and skyscrapers. When journalists knocked on his door, he ignored them. When hashtags trended, #RespectTheCoder, #EthanBuiltIt, he remained silent. His refusal to chase the spotlight only deepened his legend. He had humbled a corporation, then walked away without demanding glory. To the public, that humility became his sharpest weapon. The karmic unraveling continued. Harold faced calls for resignation daily. The same executives who had cheered his cruelty now whispered about succession plans. Investors slashed their confidence, and the once unshakable CEO now looked like a relic clinging to power. Clarissa's downfall spread too. She lost seats on advisory boards, her polished image cracking under scrutiny. Every antagonist who had once laughed at Ethan now felt the sting of public humiliation. And yet, the employees found something else in the story: hope. They began to believe that maybe their own voices mattered, that brilliance could emerge from unexpected places. Anonymous letters appeared, demanding better treatment and more respect for staff. Ethan's quiet rebellion had sparked a fire they hadn't known they carried. But Ethan himself stayed far from it. His triumph wasn't about destroying the company. It was about proving that his value didn't need validation. He had walked away with his dignity, his mastery, and his peace intact. The empire could crumble or thrive, it no longer defined him. Weeks passed. The company limped forward, but the shadow of Ethan's act lingered. Every system glitch, every late-night emergency, reminded the executives of the man they had discarded. His absence was louder than his presence had ever been. In meetings, people whispered, "What would Ethan do?" His ghost haunted the very structure he had built. And Ethan? He thrived in anonymity. He visited his favorite coffee shop where no one knew his name, contributed to open-source projects that strangers across the globe would one day rely on, and lived quietly. He didn't need applause, headlines, or fortune. He had already proven what he needed to prove, that brilliance cannot be silenced, that humility can carry more power than arrogance, and that true worth doesn't require permission to shine. Justice had been served, not with explosions or dramatic courtroom scenes, but with something far more enduring: the collapse of arrogance under its own weight, and the rise of a quiet man who needed no crown to know he was king. And that, right there, is the heart of Ethan's story. A man mocked and discarded turned out to be the quiet force holding an empire together. His triumph wasn't about riches, titles, or applause. It was about dignity, authenticity, and the reminder that brilliance often hides where no one is looking. And when it finally shines, it humbles the arrogant and inspires the overlooked. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated, pushed aside, or made to feel invisible, remember Ethan's journey. Your value doesn't vanish just because others can't see it. And sometimes, the sweetest justice is to walk away stronger, while arrogance crumbles on its own. So now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever lived a moment like Ethan's? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a space where every voice matters. And don't forget, subscribe and join us for more stories that prove the underestimated always rise.